And greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. My name is Steve Deace. No Todd Erzin today. He has the day off. Aaron McIntyre is here. So no Todd means we're going to have not one, but two guest panelists here with us here in just a few moments for the Deace Group. Our good friend, FBI whistleblower, Steve Friend, and the return, much requested, finally will happen. We've tried. We tried to make this happen several times last year. We just could not get our schedules to sync up. But the return of our good friend, former Tulsi Gabbard for President strategist, Paul Alexander. You'll be hearing more from both of them here in just a few moments. But I know we're in that time of year. We're making resolutions. We want to be healthier. We want to live better. And a lot of you are probably thinking, I'd love to do that. I know I need to get more active. I've got too much chronic pain and I cannot do that. If that is you, I've been in that cycle, by the way, where you've got too much inflammation to get active, but you're only going to get rid of that inflammation and drop the weight you want by getting active, right? And so you're thinking to yourself, I'm kind of trapped here. Darned if I do, darned if I don't, right, Bart Simpson? Well, there might be a solution for you. It's our friends over at Relief Factor. It's the drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but instead of just masking the pain like a lot of drugs do, and that can be valuable on a temporary basis, but on a, you want to be holistically healthier on a long-term basis. And so they wanted to create something drug-free that would go after the inflammation that is likely the cause of your chronic pain, that achiness, that soreness, that stiffness. And that something is Relief Factor. Now, it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all, but over the years, about 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start. 70% of them have seen such great results in 3 weeks or less. They stuck with the product long time. And it's only $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in just 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. You can also call them if you want. 1-800, the number 4-RELIEF, 800, the number 4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. All right, next hour, it'll be your turn for some Feedback Friday, but let's get it rocking and rolling with the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was is going to be getting a little different this time because it's been a minute since we have had and been able to connect and have Paul on the show. So, Paul, welcome back here to the Blaze, brother. And what have you been up to since the last time we were graced by your presence?
Well, thank you, Steve. But before we get started with the Deace Group, I have a bone to pick with Aaron, okay? I caught wind of the X post he put out yesterday advertising my return, and I need to set the record straight because I have never and will never utter the phrase, yeah, brah, okay? That is egregious, that is defamatory, and if you do not retract that statement, my new tag team partner, Steve Friend, is going to have his deep state allies come down and shut your Eeyore-sounding, brisket-loving pie hole, Aaron.
Nah, bro.
That's the perfect retort. All right, let's get to it. Issue 1, bleep, Lord Nefarious says.
Yes,
Are you willing to support our veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line to keep us safe?
Just like women are bleeding out in parking lots across the country.
You're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. You're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
Gender and, yes, genital examinations into little girls in this country.
Would you explain what a jag-off is?
Trans girls are girls.
Pete, you are a misogynist. Not only that, you are a Christian Zionist.
I've played co-ed sports all the time.
I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
CEOs love this bill.
I'm Melody, your charming companion from Realbotix' booth at CES 2025.
This is Melody. She's one of our companionship robots. She's full-bodied, and we have a lot of motors inside her, a lot of servos. She can have real-life expressions. You can change her face in 30 seconds, change her character, change the way she talks. For instance, she can smile. She's smiling right now.
Gregory, Scott.
I think everybody did a great job.
Yeah.
Unlike the internet, you know?
Yeah, right. I know. It's right.
Oh, my God. All of these fire experts. Why didn't you just fly a helicopter into the ocean? And then just, I don't know, because there was 100-knot winds? You want to do that? You want to do that at night, you lunatic?
How are you?
This was definitely mismanaged.
That's a big word we're hearing now.
Mismanaged, like some idiot on the internet knows how to manage the worst fire in LA.
Yeah, with some of those leaders, we had my team start talking to local leaders, saying what's going on. Our state,
and you weren't getting straight answers from
I was getting different answers. When you start getting different answers, then I'm not getting the actual story.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone.
These inflation refund checks. Where are you getting the money for those refund checks, and when can people expect them?
It's money that came out of New Yorkers' pockets over the last 3 years because inflation was too damn high. It's no one's fault. They paid more for everything they bought. You're a young dad, you bought diapers and formula and little clothes for Olivia.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. So you paid extra money in the cost of that, but it also meant higher sales tax. We collected $3 billion more in the last 3 years in unanticipated sales tax revenue. And I said, well, we could put that in the state coffers. Why don't we give it back, though, to the people who paid too much?
All right, let's get to it. First question. Now, we have a tradition here that the guest always gets the first question, but we have two. The lady always gets to go first. We don't have any. Okay. So, let's do this. The old Big Ten rule, Aaron, when we were growing up, before we had a conference championship game, and if they didn't play each other, then the team that went to the Rose Bowl, the most recent, stepped aside for the team that had not. Is that fair?
I wasn't aware of that, but that sounds good to me.
Maybe that's when I was growing up, and by the time you were growing up, it was already gone. Okay. So under that rule, all right, Paul, because you've been gone the longest here, you're going to get the first crack at this. What was the most vile of the vile that you just saw?
Well, having worked in the entertainment business for close to a decade, I have a lot of close friends in Los Angeles, and they are indeed very frustrated with the management of this crisis, whether or not Bill Burr wants to admit that. That is the feeling on the ground. But I did watch the show yesterday and thought you had a really good take on the RSV vaccine, red dye 3, childhood cancer rate trifecta, and how it seems like a lot of bad actors are trying to get ahead of this incoming administration and maybe whitewash their records. And that could easily be the story of the week for me. I also considered the removal of Thomas Massie from the House Rules Committee, which really disappointed me. I know your audience associates me with Tulsi Gabbard or as your token liberal friend, but I am very much a person without a political home, and your audience doesn't know that in 2024, I worked in communications on the Justin Amash Senate campaign. I bring that up because when people hear I am a split-ticket voter but don't support Trump, they assume I'm someone who maybe romanticizes the pre-Trump Mitt Romney Republican Party, and I'm not. That party has never appealed to me. It is the Rand Paul, Justin Amash, Thomas Massie style conservative that I personally find to be the most intriguing true alternative to the Democratic Party. And so to see Thomas Massie get punished for not falling in line with that completely empty suit Mike Johnson, that is disappointing and not the greatest omen for how this new Congress will operate. However, I instead want to shine a spotlight on Andrew Tate, a person who I will not hesitate to admit that I absolutely detest with every fiber of my being. Our friend Shannon Joy has been covering the Tate brothers for a long time and does some great work on this story that your audience should check out. But I also want to tip my cap to this show, Steve, along with Ben Shapiro and a few of the others on the right who have had the courage to openly denounce this sociopath. I've seen a lot of people distort the fact that his release from house arrest means he is innocent, which it does not. Tate has very publicly articulated how he manipulates, intimidates, and sexually exploits women for profit. And the language I just used is the kindest description possible, given the allegations of sex trafficking, extreme violence, and essentially running a business predicated on modern-day slavery. But let's say for argument's sake that he somehow gets cleared on all these charges, and like Candace Owens and Benny Johnson and Alina Habba, you want to normalize Andrew Tate, leverage his reach, and brand him as an ally of the right. it will not end well. He is a cancer that is spreading amongst young men. And look, I know the right cringes when they hear the term toxic masculinity. And Steve, I agree with your premise that true masculinity cannot be toxic. But what Andrew Tate is marketing to young men is in fact a toxic brand of faux masculinity, where men are encouraged to weaponize the physical advantages God has given us to manipulate, abuse, and control women, to not see them as people, but as objects to conquer, dominate, and exploit. So reject this, apply whatever you can to right-wing media pressures to pressure them, even including cutting off financial support if need be. But do not give him refuge in conservative media, because he can and already has corrupted a lot of young men and convinced them of these very dangerous lies.
Amen. The absolute best thing you can say about Andrew Tate is he's a pimp.
Yep.
That's the best thing you can say, is that he is a pimp. All right. I have no idea why there would be an interest in recruiting pimps to be the front of our messaging on any level whatsoever. They're the knuckle draggers of society, and they have been in every human society with the oldest profession known to man. So amen to that. All right, Steve, what about you?
Well, game recognized game there on Paul Alexander, because I'm here filling in for Todd, but what I really am is the lawman to stand in between you and our friend Jill Savage. You can talk all you want about chivalry today, Paul Alexander. I'm not your tag team partner. I'm dad sitting here cleaning my gun, asking you, what are your intentions? But to the montage, I got to go to Bill Burr as well, because you talk about the fact that there's now $770 being offered one-time payment to people in Los Angeles. And there was a lot of justifiable outrage about Western North Carolina, how FEMA abandoned those people. But then there was the political ramifications, the allegations that, are you hoping that these people are going to die because then they can't vote the way that they want to? Or maybe we're going to punish you because you voted a way we didn't approve of? Take it out to LA. Those people have bought in wholly, entirely to the spirit of the age. They were going to be all in for the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about trans women are women. They will glue their hands to artwork so they can protect themselves from the angry sun god. They will march and chant from the river to the sea. And at the end of the day, the true vile, vicious communists that run our government right now looked at them as useful idiots and said, yeah, you get $700, just like North Carolina. We're going to send billions over to Ukraine and launder it back to our little princeling children.
Paul, can I come back to you with something that, as Steve was talking, thinking of that Bill Burr clip, all right?
Yeah.
Because everything you just said about some elements on the right wanting to, especially there's like no advantage. Andrew Tate doesn't bring anything, right? If we just removed any moral compass from this whatsoever and just looked at it strategically, what is the value added here? He doesn't bring anything. He brings nothing. It's just all baggage. There's zero ROI here. I mean, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Even if we have no moral compass and we're just doing a P&A or a P&L here and looking at an ROI, it's an investment that is useless. Okay, let's flip this to the left. And I'm not trying to pigeonhole you, but you know more of those people than any of us do. And so I genuinely am curious, okay? When the people that are watching their houses burn down or their family members burn down, and they see, forget about Bill Burr, okay, as a comedian, and sometimes he says things that are really right, and sometimes says things that are really wrong. And I mean, he's an observer of human nature. That's, what a comedian is. I want to talk about the audience. Those are your neighbors, right? Okay. And they're clapping as he is saying that this thing isn't being mismanaged, while your life, other than the relationships you have, which is really in the end, all our lives really are. But the tangible things that account for your life, the memories you've chronicled, okay, the home you raised your children in or brought your children home to, or your grandkids go to, where your Christmas tree goes up in the family room every year, that's all gone and never coming back. And to see the crowd there applauding Bill Burr's comments, I don't understand that psychosis. Why would you applaud that? Can you explain that to us? Because you know more of the kinds of people that would sit in an audience like that than any of the three of us do. Can you just, are we missing something here? I'm trying to understand, because I don't.
I think there are a lot of people on the left who want to believe anything being promoted from the right is misinformation. And so even when all logic says that there has been mismanagement at play, it's important for their own self-identity and worldview to reject that for as long as possible. And look, I have, like I said, a lot of close friends in LA who vote Democrat, and none of them believe this has been managed well. So I don't want to make a blanket statement that anyone, who votes Democrat is okay with what Bill Burr said and believes that there should be no accountability for their elected officials, because that's not true. But in terms of the people applauding that, it's an extension of the culture wars, unfortunately, and they don't want to put at risk their own self-identity or lend any sort of credibility to newsmakers and commentators on the right for perhaps identifying what really is at play in terms of the mismanagement of this crisis.
All right, Aaron, your thoughts on your own montage. Thank you, Paul.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow what Steve and Paul just said, because those are both tour de forces. So I'm going to go for the lowest hanging fruit. Let's go to
So you're going to do what you do best.
Jack Reed. That was towards the end of his turn questioning Pete Hegseth. And Jack, you could see this in his body language. He thought he was going to get a little gotcha moment with, can you explain what a jagoff is? Like, oh, wow. You really got him there, Senator. Good job. And it just, the entire exchange made Pete Hegseth look even more like admirable and likable. It's just, again, I want to restate this. We said this earlier in the week, and it was that Jack Reed moment alone that spurred this. When you watch some of these hearings, and it can be confirmation hearings, it can be hearings for the Bureau of Tadpoles in Washington, D.C., when you watch them in real time, you are reminded how just thoroughly, obviously unimpressive most of our elected officials are.
I would have given $1,000. No. I'd have given $10,000 to the charity of Pete Hegseth's choice. If when he was asked that, if he would have then turned and said, well, frankly, Senator, I kind of thought that you'd be able to answer that question for me. Let's get to the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being Lindsey Graham is looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy, and 10 being he likes to spend his dough on boys. That one came from listener Mike Rose. I guess we're taking requests on these now. Submissions. Aaron, up and down on taking listener submissions on Lindsey Graham, strays, and blasts.
Sorry, I'm not doing this to blow smoke up your, whatever, but I don't think people can compete with the depths of depravity of your mind.
I'm going to take that. I am going to receive that as a compliment. Yes, that no one can out petty or really just be more debased than me. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yes, and I mean that in a complimentary way.
Of course you do. Of course you do. Yes. Rate this week's level of total depravity, Steve.
It's a belly tickling 10.
All right, Paul. Yes. Oh, for those of you on the podcast, you didn't see Paul just get up and leave as set, and behind him was a picture of Lindsey Graham with a thought bubble saying, make it stop. That's perfect. Aaron.
10.
All right. Let's get to issue 2. Joe Biden's curtain call.
Joe Biden said farewell to the country this week, including the garbage human beings.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
And this morning, we woke up to news that Joe Biden is a petty wannabe tyrant to the very last, as he declared that the 28th Amendment is the law of the land, despite the fact that the 28th Amendment was not ratified by the requisite number of states in the requisite time and is not, in fact, the law of the land. Again, Joe Biden, bitter to the very end.
All right. Steve, I'll start this time with you. What do you think will be the ultimate legacy of Joe Biden's presidency?
I think you have to take it away from Joe Biden entirely, because it's his masters, his puppet masters. And I want to just look through a really siloed version of this that I have in my experience with the FBI weaponization. I've said for a long time that the FBI, the federal government at large, is Skynet. And if you've seen the Terminator movies, you know Skynet is not evil. It is not good. It is just code. It just is. And it came to the conclusion that its prime directive was to survive, to push back against all threats. Ergo, the humans were the threat. It had to attack the humans. Now bring this flash forward to...
In other words, it's a bureaucracy. That's what you just defined. The bureaucracy's core mission is to perpetuate itself. Correct. Go ahead. Yeah.
Success is in growth. Getting your capabilities, getting your personnel, getting your funding. It is inevitable. You will come to the conclusion that people who oppose those sorts of things, who want to bring it to heel, are the enemy, and you must go after them. We are actually at the end of the slippery slope, the bottom of the slippery slope that so many of the Ron Paulites libertarians warned us about at the very turn of the millennium, particularly after the passage of the Patriot Act. We're at the end of the Niemöller poem. First they came for the trade unionists, then the socialists, then the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I said nothing. Now they've come for me, and there's no one left to speak for me. And we have seen that come to its full fruition under the Joe Biden presidency here, as over 1,500 J6ers have been tossed into prison. We're going after pro-lifers under the FACE Act to a tune of 92% application, more applications in his 4-year term than any other president in the last 30 years. My buddies, whistleblowers, have lost their livelihoods, unpaid, indefinitely suspended for 2+ years. We're seeing continued COVID applications. We're going to bring this back and re-rack it all over again. So to me, being at the end of the slippery slope with the opportunity to re-rack it, or to choose correctly this time, liberty over security.
Aaron.
One that
good luck following that, by the way.
One that oscillates, his legacy is going to be one that oscillates between feebleness and bitterness. I mean, and I think Steve is right on the money. You can't just analyze Joe Biden singularly, but he is still in name only, if nothing else, the president. And our enemies, if you just look categorically, were our enemies fearful of the United States over the last 4 years, by and large? Just answer these questions yourself. Did our economy, were our own people optimistic about the future over the last 4 years, by and large?
No, in the last election, 75% of the voters, right around there, were concerned that the country was on the wrong track.
You just look at it category by category, and the bitterness from that family oscillating towards the feebleness that Joe Biden and his handlers showed the country and showed the world. That's going to be his lasting legacy.
What would you say, Paul?
Aaron makes a lot of good points. Steve Friend is obviously very credible when it comes to surveillance and law enforcement, and he makes a lot of interesting points as well. I would say in the immediate term, the legacy is negative, and I think in the long term, it could be mixed. For right now, I think his presidency will be associated with 4 things. That of a frail elderly man who appeared to have some level of cognitive decline and wasn't fit for the job. That of a president who was complicit in allowing illegal migration to get completely out of control at our southern border. That of a president who campaigned on themes of unity and nobody being above the law, but who then gave one of the most divisive speeches of any president in U.S. history at Independence Hall, gave highly polarizing and partisan figures like George Soros the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and who pardoned his own son after promising he would not. And finally, that of a president who presided over a time of economic hardship. I think those first 3 are all valid. I think the 4th has a lot of gray area, and he was definitely not solely responsible for the record inflation we experienced in 2022. If we're going to be honest, the Biden presidency not only had record high after record high in the stock markets, which Trump always points to as a sign of economic strength, but our recovery in terms of GDP was far stronger than any other of the G7 nations. Unemployment reached its lowest rate since 1969, and he became the very first president to avoid any monthly job losses during his term. So beyond tax cuts and stimulus checks, few economic initiatives are felt immediately. Most come with a significant lag. And so when I look at things like the Chips and Science Act that invested in our ability to manufacture semiconductors here in the U.S., as well as some of the executive actions and legislation he signed signed into law with the infrastructure bill and American Rescue Plan that specifically strengthened organized labor and protected pension funds for a lot of blue-collar Americans. A lot of that will be felt years from now. And so it's very possible that in a decade, his legacy as president will be viewed as more of a mixed bag than one that was decisively negative.
When you hear people on our side, Paul, talk about him essentially being the presidential version of a kept man, and that there were forces that were unseen actually day to day calling the shots, running the show. Again, you talk to more people with the opposite viewpoint of us than any of us do. So what's the other side of that coin, or the rebuttal to that, would you say?
Not much of a rebuttal, really. I think there is a tepid acknowledgement, even if not a public one, that he likely was not fulfilling all the obligations a president is expected to fulfill in terms of his day-to-day activity. So it's not really much of a secret. People saw it with their own eyes. However many tens of millions saw that first debate that he was cognitively not up to the task. And I don't think it's as divisive as an idea as you might think.
Yes or no? I think if he had been the nominee, they'd have lost 40 states. Because we're not even getting to issues. We're just at the basic competency. But he made a speech or made a talk last week that he was adamant he could have won, things of that nature. You know, he's got a posture. I get that. But do you on their side, do you think there's any buyer's remorse at all now that they removed him and they should have let it ride it out?
No, I don't believe so.
I don't think so either. I agree. All right, let's get to the exit question. If your final summary of the Biden presidency were a Billboard #1 song from 1973, not just the year I was born, but that's also the first year Joe Biden got elected to public office as a senator from Delaware. All right. So which Billboard #1 song from 1973 would it be? A, Killing Me Softly with his song. B, You're So Vain. C, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. Or D, You Are the Sunshine of My Life. Which of those songs from the year he first got elected that went #1 would be your summary of Biden's presidency? Aaron.
C.
The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. All right. Steve.
You're So Vain, because they thought that they could actually say deep fakes were a thing, and that there were fewer illegal aliens streaming across the border, and that the economy has never been better.
Paul?
Only hubris lets you do that.
Pardon me. Sorry about that, Steve. Paul, what about you?
Now The Rock wanted to pick You Are the Sunshine of My Life, Jill Savage. Except The Rock knows that song was released in 1972, you pumpkinhead jabroni. So now that you've insulted the great Stevie Wonder, The Rock has to fly to Iowa, plow through the cornfields, and lay the smackers down on all your candy asses.
It is true that the song was released in 1972, but it was also #1 on the Billboard chart in 1973. That's how big of a hit that song was for the one and only Stevie Wonder. And I like the double impersonation there, both with the glasses. You didn't give us the head bob. Okay, you didn't give us that. All right. But you gave us the glasses and you gave us the rock. That was good. What I found fascinating is I actually agreed with his entire premise about oligarchy. And I think he's exactly correct. I just think he's a manifestation, and his presidency is a stand-in for the specter that he's warning us about. We're not the ones out there censoring people. I think his presidency, that's the reason I have the opinion of his presidency that I do, is because I think that we're not the ones that told corporate America, hey, we need you guys to impose on your Fortune 500 businesses that people can't work here if they don't take a shot that a month ago our Surgeon General, our CDC director went on CNN and admitted doesn't work. And you're going to lose your job if you don't take this shot. And I mean, that's what he did. That's the classic definition of oligarchy, fascism, the combination of elites in the public and the private sector. I mean, I agree with his analysis, but that's what he did. He did that. He did those things. All right, when we come back, we're coming up on a new presidency now. And given the cold, they're going to move this indoors, you're telling me, Aaron, the inaugural on Monday?
Yep.
Steve, very quickly, and I mean very quickly, how much of this is about the cold, and how much of it is it's easier maybe to secure that setting?
all about security, particularly drones.
Yep. And the cold gives you kind of the cover to do that, maybe, or a good excuse. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Trump 2.0, the looming presidency, next. Well, Paul was just mentioning during the first segment of the Deace Group that he was tuned in yesterday as we were talking about what transpired this week. Going on 30-year debate over red dye number 3, the FDA largely had ignored, now finally steps in and bans it. Then they actually put a GBS warning on Pfizer's new vaccine. It's for rotavirus, if I remember right, Aaron, correct? I think it's rotavirus.
Something like that.
I
need to double check.
And then now we have the owner of the Los Angeles Times, who himself is a decorated surgeon, suddenly now wants to come clean and be honest about what the COVID, not a vaccine, has done, particularly to youth in medical practice that he has seen. And again, like I told you yesterday, folks, they're not just suddenly aware of these things. These things, it's not that we know more than them. It's that we do not. Okay. And so at this point, we'll take anything that would save some lives and tell more truth. But it's also a reminder to take as much control over your healthcare as you can. Now, we can't operate on ourselves. We can't prescribe drugs for ourselves. So the amount of autonomy and agency that we can exhibit when it comes to our healthcare is limited, but that doesn't mean it's negated. And one of the things we can do, make sure you've got a supply of some of the venerable, proven medications that have saved literally tens of millions of lives since their discovery. And that's where Jase Medical comes in. You can get 5 of them, 5 of the greatest, most renowned antibiotics. You can have a backup of those, courtesy of Jase Medical with the Jase case. That's kind of their OG. That's case 1.0, the basic one. But now you can expand it. They've got customizable options, including Nobel Prize winning ivermectin, EpiPens, and lots of other things as well. And you'll get a discount whether you go with the OG or you want more of a customizable version. You'll get a discount with the code DACE at checkout when you go to jase.com/DACE. That's JASE, J as in jump at this, JASE, jase.com/DACE. Use the promo code DACE at checkout for the discount on your order. Promo code DACE at jase.com/DACE. All right, back here with the Deace Group. No Todd Erzin today. He's got the day off. Stephen Friend is here with us, FBI whistleblower. Also good friend of our show. Paul Alexander has returned. Let's continue on with our weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Trump 2.0 looms.
Donald Trump was elected the 47th president of the United States, running on a platform of 20 different priorities. The top 10 priorities are as follows: sealing the border and stopping the migrant invasion, carrying out the largest deportation operation in American history, ending inflation and making America affordable again, making America the dominant energy producer in the world by far, stopping outsourcing and turning the United States into a manufacturing superpower, large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips, defending our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms, preventing World War III, ending the weaponization of government against the American people, and stopping the migrant crime epidemic, demolishing foreign drug cartels, crushing gang violence, and locking up violent offenders. Those are the top 10 priorities on the 20 priority platform of Donald Trump. We're going to be able to see if he can execute on those priorities very soon.
All right, so we talked about looking back upon the Biden presidency. Let's look forward now upon how we project the second Trump presidency. Paul, I'll go back to you for the first answer here. What is your ultimate hope for the forthcoming second Trump presidency?
Several things. First, I pray for his safety, not because I'm MAGA, but because I'm an American and he's our president. I texted Aaron a photo from a subway station I was in yesterday where someone graffitied "Kill Trump." You know, political violence can't become a normalized mean of change in a free society, and so I hope that the president is kept safe. Second, I said this back on your show last March that I do think the American people would support some level of mass deportation, and a majority of Americans definitely want the southern border secured. But regarding deportations, if that is something that actually occurs, conduct these in a way that respects the humanity of these migrants. Do not carry this out in a cruel or callous manner. Do everything possible to protect the dignity of those you deport, not only because it's the humane way to govern, but because if he doesn't, I promise the public will turn against him. Third, I think, Steve, you and I are aligned on this one, but if people like RFK Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya can root out the rot and corruption in the food, medical, and public health systems that have been failing this country and make positive systemic changes, which we are already seeing to some degree, that will impact Americans for generations to come and would be one of the most meaningful things a second Trump term could accomplish. And finally, we are overdue for a major market correction. It wouldn't matter if Trump or Kamala had won. These are global markets, they're overheating, and it would happen regardless. Whether it's the 18.6-year cycle or the macro fear and greed indexes, most indicators suggest we have another year or so before a serious correction begins. So my hope is that Trump's tariff policies do not exacerbate this correction and cause more pain than we otherwise would have felt. You know, people forget that during his first term, the tariff war with China led to the U.S. government subsidizing farmers at more than double the rate of Obama. That is not sustainable with a $36 trillion national debt. So I just hope that it's more rhetorical bluster and a means to negotiate than it is actual policy, and we don't experience another 2008-style economic collapse.
I think a lot of our audience would agree with that. On the healthcare stuff, what I have found amazing, it really is, again, going back to what I just said about oligarchy last segment, it's like a switch was flipped here. Okay. So when I'm at the gym, it's the only time I see in real time corporate or mainstream media, Paul. I mean, I make sure to follow it in my feed as much as possible so that I'm informed and aware of what's being said comprehensively for my job. But as a consumer of content, when I'm not on the clock, the only time I ever actually see it in real time is when it's up on all the screens at the gym. Okay. And it has blown my mind the last couple of days, Paul. So CBS this morning, the Today Show. Okay. Now suddenly covering what's going on with Red Dye 3 and the Pfizer vaccine warning and all that. I mean, it's just like they just suddenly became aware of these things. The timing of this, it has to be whoever's calling the shots between the coordination of these entities has said, listen, man, we got to get ahead of the Overton window on this. So, start making preemptive deposits here, because now even the media stuff, now they're doing the kinds of reporting that I used to think, as a young conservative in the 90s, this was granola crunching liberalism. Okay. All right. Now suddenly they've gone back to doing that kind of reporting on these issues rather than just ripping and reading big pharma ads and calling and press releases and calling them news stories. And I'm like, where's this been for the last 6 months, 6 days, year, 6 years? It's crazy. It just suddenly they want to talk about this stuff and cover it now. That cannot be a coincidence. Steve, what about you? What are you looking forward to? Hopeful for?
I'm hopeful there's going to be an appetite to do away with the whole, we don't do tit for tat on our side. We allow them to go 3 steps forward. We push back 1, except the battlefield conditions. They're suboptimal. But it just is a reality that we're involved in a cold civil war at this time. We have to have certain modicum of mutually assured destruction. That is going to require accountability. So for the weaponization, which is big for me, look, it's not enough to pardon the January 6ers. You have to then prosecute the prosecutors and the agents that weaponize the apparatus against people wholly inappropriately. The same act goes for the FACE Act, 92% application, putting an 89-year-old Eva Edel in jail, a concentration camp survivor because she was praying outside of an abortion clinic, or Mark Houck, someone who took it all the way to trial. It's not enough to give them any sort of commutation. The people that sat there and around the conference table and made that decision to go forward, and then the elements of the FBI or whatever apparatus who went out in tactical gear to bring Mark Houck into custody, they need to be held accountable. And similarly for my friends, the whistleblowers out there who've been unpaid, indefinitely suspended for years. It's not enough to just make them whole, restore their clearance, and then hope that they just resign and go off into some of their own personal endeavors. The people that did that to them, and then the actual reasonable concerns that we brought forward, all of those need to be fleshed out. We need to be transparent with it. And it can't just be 3 steps to the left, 1 step back. We actually have to gain back ground now, move it, shift the entire paradigm to the right.
Amen.
Aaron.
Every syllable. So I've been pretty consistent that I never really thought, even during the primary, if Donald Trump could win. I just didn't think he could win, and I was happy to be wrong about that. But I didn't think that it was going to be a lame duck presidency at all. I thought it'd be a lot like his first term. We'd get a lot of good things, a lot of things that we'd maybe be shaking our heads over. But I'm even more optimistic than that take, because Steve is absolutely right. You have to gain back ground here, like actually take back ground. This is not the Democrats just, whether it's a piece of legislation or whether it's policy within the bureaucratic Leviathan, they always ask for 10. The Republicans say, no, we're only going to give you 5. And the Republicans campaign on, hey, we beat back the Democrats. Meanwhile, they're still making ground. So that has to end one way or another. But the main reason why I'm optimistic, and I think I said this last year, we had maybe 1 or 2 cabinet members in the first Trump administration that we were really excited about. One of them, Jeff Sessions, turned out to be a total disappointment. Now there's at least a half dozen to maybe 10, probably even more than that are like really serious individuals. Heck, say what you want about, I think it's Scott Bessent the other day. He was really impressive during his confirmation hearing. Don't agree with his lifestyle at all. Again, is Donald Trump going to miss on all of these appointments?
No,
that we're excited?
He's not going to hit on them all, but
he's not going to hit on them all, but
he's
he's not going to miss on them all either. So again, the thing that I'm most optimistic about is that we actually have an opportunity to do what Steve is talking about. When it comes down to brass tacks, though, we're just going to have to let it play out, watch it play out, especially over this first year.
Let's get to the exit question. By the way, don't forget, Monday, our entire show will be dedicated to the inauguration. We'll be here roundtable style, breaking it down, but also looking ahead to the Trump presidency as well. So make sure you're tuned in for that on Monday here on the Steve Deace Show. All right, exit question. If your anticipated summary of the Trump presidency 4 years from now were a #1 Billboard song from 2000, which was the year that was the first time Donald Trump ever ran for president as tried to get the nomination of the Reform Party. That was in 2000, the first time he ever ran for president. So if your anticipated summary of Trump's presidency was a #1 song from the year 2000, which Billboard #1 from 2000 would it be? A, Everything You Want. You know, they've got that song back, and it took 20 years to get that song out of my head. And since I typed this into the script, I can't get it. I went to bed humming it. I woke up singing it. I can't get it out of my head again. B, Amazed. C, Oops, I Did It Again. Or D, He Wasn't Man Enough, Tony Braxton. Steve, what about you?
Oops, I Did It Again. Sometimes it'll look like a wholesome young lady in a Catholic school uniform, and other times it's going to look like shaved her head and is juggling knives.
That's so good. I don't think Paul and I
Paul,
should.
go ahead and try to top that if you want, or you can just ditto his answer. Nice. For those listening on the podcast, Paul got up, left his set again. He's got another picture of Lindsey Graham there now with a thought bubble that says, I'm always man enough. Nice. So Paul went from asking me to make it stop to actually dropping one of the best Lindsey Graham blasts that's ever been dropped ever on this show. So there you go. Aaron, what about you?
Man, I got to ditto Steve's answer, but then Paul was so good here. Can I just ditto them both?
Sure.
That's what I'm going to do.
Let's get to our kicker topic. All right, issue 4 here real quick. What's the #1 thing you want Donald Trump to communicate at his inaugural address on Monday? Aaron.
You have a future. If you were born in this country, you have a future in this country, and that future is bright.
Paul?
You know, there are some things that I would love to see that I know we're not going to get, like some humility and, maybe contrition and a little bit of self-awareness. But the most I can hope for that I think is realistic is that it's a speech that reaffirms his administration's commitment to certain principles, protecting and defending our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Not winning, not being great, not a partisan rally speech filled with clickbait buzzwords, but a promise to the American people that these next 4 years will not be about him, but rather that he will work to restore people's faith that government exists to serve them. Acknowledge the magnitude of the challenges we currently face, and instead of pretending that he alone can solve these issues in one day, set more reasonable expectations and make clear that it will require the active involvement of the American people. If he can do those things, I would be very impressed.
I wouldn't be shocked if some of what you just said is communicated on Monday, but we'll see. Steve.
I just wanted to read off 1,585 names at this point, saying that they're all pardoned, all the January 6ers, one name at a time, and particularly Steve Baker, friend of all of us here at the Blaze.
All right, let's get to predictions. Steve, these got to be quick. We got about 2.5 minutes. Steve, go ahead.
I'm going to do full Dacian fashion here. Heads I win, tails you lose. And that is that I went to the Orange Bowl a week ago. I'm a Notre Dame grad. My dad took my son, saw them win that game, the college football semifinal. My prediction is that we will have seen the greatest Notre Dame win in the last 30 years come Monday night. I got Ohio State winning the game, but I'll be happy to be wrong. I'm good either way. I'm going to laugh if Ohio State's most expensive team ever loses, and I'm going to laugh if they win that we still beat them nevertheless. So I am good either way. I really don't. I've got a bunch of people ask me, what do you think? I'm good either way. Plus, I got a futures ticket. I bought a futures ticket on Notre Dame and Ohio State both to win the Natty back in May. So I really am good either way. Aaron.
Yeah, I had forgotten what my prediction was by the time last week's Deace Group or show even ended. But boy, howdy, my mentions were full of Bills Mafia on Sunday afternoon. So in that vein, given that was such a bad prediction, I'm going to say the Chiefs lose to the Texans tomorrow.
Emotional hedge?
Yes.
Love the emotional hedge picks from Aaron. Not in 10-degree weather, they're not. All right, with the Dome team. Paul, quickly go.
I do not believe that Tulsi Gabbard will be confirmed as director of DNI.
Wow. That would be something. I'm changing my pick here at the last minute based on what the Biden Department of Education tried to pull yesterday on college athlete player compensation. This is the easiest messaging opportunity the Trump administration could ask for. You are not going to have a bunch of white girls on the women's rowing team who are a subsidy getting the same ratio of compensation as football players who are almost all black and are actually the source of the subsidy for all of the other women's sports. I mean, this is just teed up. And in an election where Democrats had historic slippage amongst young men, including minority young men, I mean, for the Trump, it's not just that they're good; they're never going to let this policy stand. But that's how they need to. They need to message it that way. They need to message it. Hey, the ones making the money here are the black athletes. And no way that this is a meritocracy. Or you can just go Linda McMahon and say, listen, we're not paying Glow the same amount of money as Hulk Hogan and The Rock. We're not doing that. Okay, there's one thing I know not to do. We don't pay Glow the same amount of money as Hulk Hogan and The Rock. All right, so can message it that way too. But that's my prediction, is that policy. And I think the Biden administration rolled that out yesterday knowing it wasn't going to stand. This was just the equivalent of somebody's auditioning to be the next blogger at Vox before it goes out of business. That was never going to happen, ever. Paul, always good to see you, brother. Thank you. As always.
Likewise, good to see you guys.
All right. We'll definitely try to see if our schedules can connect more this year, all right, than we were able to make it last year, brother. And Steve, good to see you too as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
And good luck on Monday night. And we're going to come back with one more hour, and it'll be your turn with Feedback Friday here next. Stay tuned. All right, we're back with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Todd Erzin has the day off, but neither Aaron nor I have world-class championship athlete children, at least Aaron's case, not yet. So we don't. We are here. We're here because we put America first, unlike Todd. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok, at least until Sunday. All right.
What the heck was the point of all of this?
I don't know. And now there's an app that is overt Chinese propaganda that is like the number one downloaded app in the world right now. I don't know. You can also, I had a real strong opinion about this like a year and a half ago, and then I started asking more questions, and I couldn't, like what you just asked, and I couldn't answer it, which is why I have no take on it now.
This was like massively bipartisan support claiming national security risk. The current White House signed it into law, said, yeah, we got to get this done. And now I think the Biden White House this morning is saying, no, we're not going to enforce the law. And Trump has already promised, basically, we're going to save the app. Can you tell me what this was?
The one strong opinion I do have is kind of sketch that they were like, well, we would rather shut the app down than get rid of the Chinese propaganda.
Correct. That's a tell.
That's kind of a tell. But then I have to stop and ask myself, if we have to shut down everything that is either direct Chinese propaganda or indirectly propagandizing the worldview that China teaches its own people, if we had to shut that down in this country,
we'd shut down
what's
Alphabet,
left?
we'd shut down.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is ultimately left at this point? Correct. All right. So also, if you are a podcast listener, if you would not mind, please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you if you have. You can also hit subscribe or follow on iTunes, and that makes sure that you get every single podcast we do every single time. And we appreciate you for doing that too. We'd also appreciate it if you'd subscribe to our new YouTube channel. Even if you hate YouTube, it would help us. All right. So just subscribe at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. I mentioned that our Monday show, I'm going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been invited in multiple different ways to be a part or to come to the inauguration and the inaugural stuff on Monday. And every time I get invited, I'm kind of like, maybe I should have not scheduled a speaking engagement. Then I saw the weather forecast in Washington, D.C. compared to Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm going next week, and I don't regret it. Another reason I don't regret it, we're going to have a great team on the ground there at the Blaze on Monday, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time, right there from the nation's capital. Blaze Media, you've got Glenn, you've got Stu. They're going to broadcast from the edge of the Potomac, with breathtaking views from Washington, D.C.'s most iconic monuments and sites, joined by an all-star cast like Allie Beth Stuckey, Matthew Peterson, Chris Bedford, Steve Baker, and more. All right, plus some special guests as well. You don't want to miss that. Starting at 11 a.m. Eastern on Monday, the second inauguration of Donald Trump. All right, and so right now, you can get $47, for the 47th president. You can get $47 off an annual subscription to The Blaze. So you don't miss any of this. All right. With the promo code 47, just go to blaze47.com now. Blaze47.com now. Get $47 off an annual subscription. When you go to blaze47.com right now, use the promo code 47. All right, let's get to some Feedback Friday. Aaron, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with this one from T. Brian Price. He says, I really enjoyed your walk through history and analysis of Islam for Theology Thursday last week. I was wondering if you had any suggestions or recommendations about books or other materials to study on Islam and its history. You bet I do. Now, I mean, volumes of material have been written about this in the last 1,500 years, okay? I would urge you to try and read the Quran translated into English. Now, there's a major school of thought in Islam that if the Quran is not in Arabic, it is not actually the Quran. All right? But the thing that's going to stand out to you, I think, as just a Western reader, if you try to read the Quran, is its randomness. The Bible is not necessarily published in chronological order. You can get chronological Bibles, by the way. I would urge you to not read a chronological Bible until you have studied the Bible in its traditional form first, because it might actually kind of confuse you more. Okay, but it is divided into segments, right? You have the law, okay. You have the prophets. You have the Psalms. You have the Gospels. All right. So you have the epistles. All right. There's nothing like that in the Quran. Its verses are called and chapters are called surahs. It is extremely random. It is a stream of consciousness. And, one day Muhammad wakes up and he's like, I want to buy the world a Coke, and teach it how to sing. And the next day he wakes up and it's like death metal, kill them all. I mean, and it's just really random. Like, it's very difficult to follow. But I do think it would be worth don't do what I did one time though, because I really wanted to study it. And for the first time after 9/11. Yeah, I went through TSA once with a Quran. Don't do that. Yeah, don't. Like right after, Yeah, don't. After there's been like a terrorist attack, don't go to the airport on an airplane and bust out the Quran. I made that mistake once. Don't do that. That's my first piece of advice. But I do advise you try to read it if you can. It'll be a difficult read. Gotta warn you. Also, there are numerous hadiths. Not just one. You need to know that. Okay. But if you're looking for some simpler stuff to read, there was a fantastic book written in the early 2000s I would highly recommend. And it's called Paul Meets Muhammad, A Christian and Muslim Debate the Resurrection. And the premise of this book is that holographic technology and AI essentially get together digital manifestations of the Apostle Paul and Muhammad. And I think they put them together for a globally televised debate. And I want to say that they ended up doing this like at the Astrodome. That tells you how long ago this book was written. And they go back and forth on the claims and facts, because of course Islam teaches that there was no resurrection because Jesus wasn't crucified. That Allah took Prophet Jesus and saved him from those persnickety Jews and tricked him by giving him Judas Iscariot to crucify instead. And then Jesus kind of went on his merry way. And then some vestiges of Islam teach, this is really popular like in Iran, for example. Some vestiges of Islam teach in their eschatology that Jesus is the 12th Imam who will return at the end, the prophet Jesus, minor prophet, and slay all the idolaters who claim that Allah had a son and is 3 in 1 and therefore are polytheists.
Yeah, I was going to say just doing a brief study of Islamic eschatology and the run-up to the eschatological times of Islam will help, I think, illuminate why they do or why they believe what they believe and why they act the way they act here and now. Mm-hmm. It is a dark counterfeit reflection, or let's just not say even reflection. It's a dark counterfeit of Christian eschatology by and large, but it does illuminate why they act the way they do.
The entire religion is a bastardization of Christianity and Judaism. The entire religion is. I mean, look at the debate Todd and I have had back and forth on, during our Roman study on can you lose your salvation or not. In Islam, the debate is, can I acquire salvation or not? You are never eternally secure at any point. You're never in a state of grace at any point in Islam. And then what happened later is some of these hadiths. These hadiths are like clarifications. All right. And the reason why there's several of them is because there were two warring sects, you know them today as Sunnis and Shias, each claiming that they were the rightful inheritor of the legacy of Muhammad. And so over the course of time, they've written numerous different clarifications back and forth in these multiple hadiths. And it's the hadiths, this is alluded to in the Quran as well, but the hadiths are what really drive home that the one way to obtain eternal security in Islam and to be in a perpetual state of grace with Allah and to be assured of that is to die as a martyr's death in the cause of jihad. But I would urge a great starting point to be Paul Meets Muhammad, A Christian and Muslim Debate the Resurrection. I think that's a great starting point to see where both sides are coming from. So great question, T. Brian. Appreciate that. All right, Paige wants to know, or has a suggestion, Aaron, top 5 movies that are so bad that they're good. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Number 5, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
No. Sorry.
Is it just bad or so bad it's good?
The prequels get As I age, maybe I'm getting more soft, and I am a little bit pissed off at George Lucas after now having watched both the Dune movies, is that Star Wars is kind of a cheap knockoff of Dune. But
Spice, for example?
Yes, I still have an affinity for Star Wars. But the older I get, yeah, there's some wooden acting in those prequels, but they're not terrible. They're not terrible, especially the third one. That's an objectively good film, especially the third one. So
the third one
I'm selling.
Revenge of the Sith is a very good film. Its fatal flaw, in my view, is that it takes too long to get to the events that lead to the trilogy that we all love and that we all hold dear. And then by the time it gets there, it feels like, oh snap, we have to get this wrapped up in 10 minutes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's really well done until the end, where these moments, given the existential, gravity of what they mean to the Star Wars narrative, should have been given more time to breathe, simmer, to be, horrified by, anticipated of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They just kind of wrap up like the TV movie that recognizes, okay, we're out of time and it's got to go here because the 10 o'clock news is coming on,
Yeah.
All right, so you're a no on that Revenge or that Attack of the Clones is so good that it's bad.
Yep.
All right, Lady Hawk. I've never seen this.
Never seen that either.
Okay, so I'll just have to take Paige's word for it. We both will. This one I will affirm her on. Grease 2. Have you ever seen this?
I have not.
Grease 2 is awful. It is. Maxwell Caulfield. It was the first starring role for Michelle Pfeiffer is Grease 2. Okay. Amy and I both agree the movie is so bad that it's actually good. It's so schlocky that it's actually good. Even now, years later, every few months, one of the songs in the film is one of the T-Birds is trying to convince the one of the Pink Ladies to go to bed with him. Okay. And they're trapped in a this is the 50s, okay, late 50s, early 60s. So everybody's Red Scare, nukes could drop at any minute, right? Okay, and so they think they might be in a bomb shelter. Okay, there might be a war going on, and so he tries to convince her, and I'm quoting here, "Let's do it for our country." Okay, we might be all that's left of America. Okay, and there's an entire song predicated on that. That's how bad it is. Even now, years later, Amy and I every now and then will just be doing something like getting the groceries. We'll be at Costco and we'll just look at each other. Let's do it for our country. Okay. The movie is so bad, it is good. I agree with Paige on this one. All right. I would not recommend it to anyone, but I would tell you, you'll probably end up enjoying it in spite of itself if you do find yourself watching it. It's the personification of schlock. Number 2, I agree with this one too. Paige is 2 for, she's 2 in a row on this. Beastmaster.
Never heard of it.
Now, the reason why you've never heard of it is because you're not my age. But Beastmaster was the basic, there was 2 movies could be found on any channel of basic cable when we were growing up at any point in time. Clash of the Titans with Harry Hamlin. You ever seen that? That's where Release the Kraken comes. This is where we're finally getting to the point now that our age gaps are starting to show up more. This is where the term Release the Kraken comes from, is from this movie.
Not from Pirates of the Caribbean?
No. It comes from this film, which was made about 20 years before the first Pirates of the Caribbean film was. All right. And so Clash of the Titans with Burgess Meredith and Harry Hamlin, where we first released the Kraken. And Beastmaster with Mark Singer, who was in V, and Mark Singer was in a ton of schlocky TV shows and movies in the early to mid 80s. And Beastmaster and Clash of the Titans could be found on at least one basic cable channel when we were growing up 24/7. In fact, I think there's a scene in the movie PCU, where one of the students is doing his senior film thesis on, he can always find on every channel, and he can't go to sleep until he finds a movie that doesn't have Michael Caine or Gene Hackman or isn't the Beastmaster on television, and they show him and he's just like, looks like he hasn't slept for like 3 months because they're on TV so often. All right. So Beastmaster, that is some classic schlock, Paige. That's a good poll. Did we go to high school together, Paige? By any chance? And then number one, all right, with the exception of these last three, Paige, you've hit a home run on these last three. Todd's gonna hate it that he missed this list. Number one, to me, one of the all-time examples of a movie so bad it's good. Flash Gordon. I'm Sam Jones, quarterback, New York Jets. Topol from Fiddler on the Roof is in this.
Really?
Yes. Max von Sydow, the great character actor, plays Ming the Merciless, one of the first great comic book villains ever in American comic book fiction lore. Flash and Queen does the soundtrack. A young Timothy Dalton is in this movie as well. Yeah, I mean, this movie is some flat out schlock. And I loved it as a little kid. I mean, I loved it. I had the soundtrack album. I still remember the cover because Flash Gordon's colors are cardinal and gold, and the album cover was bright gold, and the Flash Gordon logo was in the emboss, where it's kind of like matted letters in red. Okay, yeah, Paige, we had to have gone to school together because your top three, sister, are cash money, homie.
Going back to Chaim Topol, did you know that he was a Mossad spy in addition to being a really good actor?
Was he really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
His family, after he passed away, said he went on all of these unexplained trips all across the globe, wiretapping, doing other spy activities.
That's a hell of a front.
I know. Yeah.
Brilliant character actor and opera singer. Yes. She also mentions as a bonus Highlander. Yes. Although I don't think that movie's bad. I don't think it's schlocky. I just think it's a good movie. Slipper in the Rose, I don't know that one. And The Wilderness Family, I don't know that one. But your final three there, Grease 2, Beastmaster, Flash Gordon. Yeah. If you grew up at the advent of basic cable, those three movies are absolute schlock classics. That's as schlocky and as schlock can get. Yes.
So you're buying this list?
I am, because of how good the first three are. Yeah. Definitely, I'm buying the list for sure. In your era, all right, what would you say are movies that are so bad they're good?
Well, again, I cannot recommend this movie because there's some really bad stuff in it, and if you watch it, make sure you're married and watch it with your wife so she can fast forward through some of those bad moments. But I think we're going to actually watch this, or The Disaster Artist, which is another movie, a more recent movie based on the making of the original movie, but it's The Room. And it's not the horror movie. I've brought this up before. It's not the horror movie. It's by this guy named Tommy Wiseau, who is just this guy in San Francisco that sells like T-shirts by the side of the road. Has this inexplicable wealth, a love for film. He's, a film buff. Has this really odd accent. Nobody can figure out where he's from. It kind of sounds Eastern European, but when anybody asks him where he's from, he'll say New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans. It's just a really weird figure. But he has this inexplicable wealth. And he writes this awful screenplay and uses his wealth to make it into a movie. And it is awful. And it is just so, like, characters introduced, we have no idea who they are. They're just kind of there. We have no idea what is going on at any given moment.
Randomness is what you're saying.
Yes. So it has become a cult classic. But I cannot recommend it, but it is so bad, it is good.
All right, let's continue on here. This one is from Rudy. Or no, this one's from Mike. Mike says, I first started watching you guys back in late 2020, and I've been hooked ever since. Because of your show and the promotion of the biblical worldview you guys push, I started reading the scriptures last year. And now my 15-year-old daughter has just ordered her very first Bible a few months ago. After hearing the constant drilling from Todd and you for me to get out and do something, I found out who was running for my district's senator in West Virginia. So I took it upon myself to contact him and volunteered for his campaign. We ran a very successful campaign, handily defeating West Virginia District 2 Senator Mike Maroney, who's a complete and total rhino fraud. Because of this man, men dressing up like women were allowed to be in girls' sports and locker rooms. When it comes time for our local school board elections, I will be one of those running. You guys and God gave me the push I needed to do something. Thank you for all you do, and God bless. Mike, thank you. Thank you, brother. I mean, that's the two pieces of feedback we want more than any other are, one, your show caused me to look at the Word of God differently and take it more seriously and to consider faith in ways I previously had not. And then two, you guys encouraged me and inspired me to act on what I believe and to try and make a difference. And particularly when that second one comes from men, but we like it from the fairer sex as well. But particularly we're in an era where the men are lacking initiative, direction, and action and are needed to provide and to lead in all three of those sectors. And here's the thing, Mike, your note gave us both. So brother, man, you're very welcome. First and foremost, thank God for the ability and the opportunity and the platform. And then number two, thank you though for giving us this feedback, because it's such a great encouragement for us to know we are making a difference. All right, it's a business here, and we have to make a profit, and the Blaze has to generate more revenue than the show costs. Otherwise, we don't get to keep doing it, at least not for the Blaze anyway. And so those things have to be honored. We're not an overt ministry. We're not a nonprofit. So, you know, compensation does matter here. But the ultimate fulfillment for why we do what we do and why we do it the way we do, brother, is to get feedback exactly from men like you and people like you, like what you sent us. So, Mike, thank you very much for that. We're all greatly encouraged by that. You have any thoughts, Aaron?
Yeah, and it's always encouraging to hear notes like this, as Steve just said. It's refreshing, it's encouraging, and it's above all energizing, because it is true this show is a means to an end. It absolutely is. But the end is not what the end is for most shows, even in right-wing spaces. Mm-hmm. The end is that, what you just heard. So, yeah, would we like always to make more money? Yeah, but that's not the end goal. That's not the end goal. The means to the end of this show is hearing stories like that and hearing them more frequently. So not necessarily hearing them, but knowing that is happening as a result of what God is doing through our show, despite the people on the show sometimes. But I mean that in jest, but that is really encouraging. Thank you, sir.
By the way, I don't have time to be fair to another note here before break. So can we discuss some news that's breaking here in the last half an hour?
Yeah.
Washington Post is reporting, and it has not been denied by anybody, but the Washington Post is reporting that Vivek Ramaswamy is gearing up to run for governor of Ohio.
Yeah.
Now, when this speculation began last year, I've already, I'm not in the business of doing like a whole bunch of candidate endorsements and stuff anymore. As the show has grown, I can't be as informed on a bunch of candidates like I used to be. Okay. But when I think that a candidacy in particular has the potential to be such a paradigm shift, I'll give you my opinion and maybe issue an endorsement. And in this case, I already have. I'm 100% enthusiastically supportive of Vivek Ramaswamy running for governor of Ohio.
Co-signed.
He is a master messenger. And so is J.D. Vance, by the way, as well. I mean, J.D. Vance might be the best messaging Republican I've seen since Reagan, frankly. But what I think is important to see is that messaging put into action. Now here's the thing. If you can't message, you're not going to get to do dramatic political action in our culture. Too many forces aligned against you. The people's attention spans are too short. Their passions too easily manipulated. So if you go to do disruptive things and you can't message them accordingly, I mean, you're literally Hitler in 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, it's the old G.I. Joe cartoon when I was a kid, the PSA at the end. Well, now I know, and no one's half the battle. Well, now I can message. Well, messaging's half the battle right there. Right. But then there's the reality of what happens when lots of other human natures get involved. Like we were just talking a few days ago about DeSantis. Look at all the success he's had in Florida, and he still essentially has to have Daddy Trump come home and remind the children in the legislature of what their responsibilities are. You know what I'm saying? Like you still have to manage all these various egos and persuasions and distractions and ideologies. And I think it is vitally important to see what happens when you marry the message. He's almost messaging perfection at times. I mean, he's literally like if we constructed an AI with the perfect right-wing messaging on most issues, it would be most of the time when Vivek Ramaswamy talks. And now I want to see that married to the actual statecraft, the hands and feet of that messaging when it comes to actual governing. And it's in a state now that's very red, right? He's not even walking into a situation like DeSantis did in Florida where Barack Obama had just won the state twice. Okay. I mean, this state is the reddest it's ever been. It's not really even a swing state anymore right now. It's kind of gone red the way Virginia's kind of gone blue, as swing states. So I'm all for this, and I hope he gets elected, and I can't wait to see the messaging turned into action, Aaron.
I want to be his biggest advocate and supporter because right now I can't stand the guy, and I want him to win this, and I want him to win this handily because of everything that you just said. If he can actually turn that into real governance, turn his messaging into real governance, he's going to be the most successful Ohio governor in history. He will be. But can he do that? Because right now it's just a lot of talk, and he's really good at talking. And that's not to disparage him. He has a gift of communication, a really good gift of turning of the phrase, of communicating ideas in a very succinct and thoughtful way. He does have that, and it is a gift. But I want to be his biggest advocate and supporter, but he's got to show me that he can do that. That's why I want to see him win as well and win handily.
Listen, let's say this too. I mean, even if he can only do 25, 30% of his messaging, that's 100% upgrade basically over Mike DeWine.
Yes. If he can do 100% less writing of sonnets to
COVID.
A virus.
Yes.
That's going to be an upgrade.
Yeah, I'd much rather see him in an executive office moving an agenda than in the Senate where he's just one of 100 votes and doesn't have any leadership position, right? It's time to take the people who have the messaging initiative and give them real power and see what they can do with it.
Yes.
We'll come back. More Feedback Friday in a moment. Hey, this Sanctity of Life month, we honor the over 66 million babies whose lives have been tragically ended through abortion since Roe v. Wade. And sadly, even though Roe has been overturned, we have seen abortions actually increase in many places around the country because of the baby-killing pill. In fact, that accounts for a majority of all abortions now. You can get it mail order in a lot of places. So essentially every mailbox now can be an abortion mill. But in the midst of this kind of darkness, there is a light that shines, and that's ministries like PREBORN. They've rescued over 300,000 babies in the history of their ministry. Since we started partnering with them here on The Blaze a few years ago, we've helped them save tens of thousands of babies as well. And they do it through confronting a woman with the truth of her baby's heartbeat, so that she can feel and experience for the first time maybe that that's not a glob of tissue, but a real person and a different person, a separate person from her. And if you want to be a part of that, because then they bring in the grace too. They're there for the mom after she chooses life with all the support that she needs, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby's birth. And they do all of this free of charge, even though none of it is actually free. And that's where tax-deductible donations from people like us comes from. Maybe you can afford $5. Maybe you can afford $5,000. If that's you, that would sponsor Preborn's entire network of clinics for 24 hours. Might help rescue up to 200 kids. All right, so wherever you're at, they will take however much help you can give. All right, and so many of you have been so generous already. Let's keep it going. Go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Again, preborn.com/Steve. And Preborn, you need to know, has a 100% charity rating, so you can give with confidence at preborn.com/Steve. All right, are we ready to continue on with some Feedback Friday?
You bet.
All right, let's go here. And this wasn't timed this way on purpose, but it's a great segue. Because one of the few times we've seen Vivek Ramaswamy get himself into some messaging murkiness was over the H-1B visa fight before Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a note, and it's going to be a little bit longer, Aaron, but given the details, I think this is stuff our audience needs to hear so they can be better informed and make up their own mind. All right,
Sounds good.
This is from Dan Wilkinson. He says, I worked for 30 years as a senior executive at a U.S.-based Fortune 100 healthcare company, and through the years had the privilege of being the captain of 5 college recruiting teams located in the Midwest and also UC Berkeley. While in California, I recruited around 100 interns / full-time hires and mentored in the past and continuing now roughly with 400 students and grads. Given the demographics of Berkeley, a lot of my recruits and mentees were international students from Asia, which required H-1B visas for continued employment. It cost money and lots of time and extra effort for a firm to recruit international students and get them onto the H-1B visas, especially given there is no guarantee they will even be successful in this endeavor to gain the approval from the USCIS. Beyond the cost of the visa, it's a lot of attorney time and cost and HR and overall organizational time. And when we would send some of these students, some of those we recruited into our 2-year leadership development program onto overseas assignments, that would require much more lengthy and difficult processes than for our USA citizens to get that country's needed visa. The point being that it's much more work and added expense, not less, than recruiting U.S. citizens. Thus, I much preferred to recruit U.S. citizens whenever possible, but there was simply not enough qualified and interested candidates to come anywhere close to fulfilling our needs. The problem, in a big part, is due to the fact that many, but not all cases, of U.S. citizens are not as qualified as the other applicants, and even for those that are in the ballpark, there are just not enough of them. I agree that we need to fix this problem from the ground up, but given that given the state of many universities, even if things flipped right now on improving the education system and a culture of working hard versus entitlement was instilled, we are still many years away from delivering enough qualified candidates. So simply saying to eliminate or cut down on properly vetted H-1B visas, in my opinion, is simply not an acceptable answer for many U.S.-based firms whose success depends on a continual stream of high-quality individuals being brought into the organization. I do agree with the strategy of increasing a salary floor to a much higher number, but $300K makes no sense. How many firms are willing to pay college graduates or someone with less than 5 years of experience $300K salary in any endeavor? As of right now, 95% of firms recruiting at Berkeley and other universities, might even be closer to 100%, and also those companies on LinkedIn for those with 5 years experience or less, will not recruit international students and grads simply because of the extra burdens of cost I described above. The question, do you require sponsorship, is on almost every application. So make the salary floor $120K or even $150K to eliminate any low labor abuse, or even do a tiered approach based on years of experience. But we also need to increase the probability of H-1B application success. Historically, it's not even 25% for truly qualified candidates, so that companies are willing to take the risk for high quality jobs where USA's citizen pool of qualified candidates is not sufficient. To the college parents and others who believe we should simply hire U.S. graduates and decrease or eliminate the H-1B process, I would say this. Have your kids go get a hireable degree instead of one that sounds interesting. Get internships, find mentors, join student groups, network like crazy. Have a strong work ethic, work on the soft skills, and prep smart for interviews. And they will have no problem finding excellent jobs. I've seen many, many times students and grads that were completely overwhelmed at the start do these things and land great jobs. Again, that's from Dan Wilkinson. So we're really right now talking about your generation.
Correct.
And then my daughter, Anna's generation. So I want to get your reaction to this most of all.
Well, that was a very interesting perspective, and it's kind of winging into what I was talking about, giving Elon Musk the benefit of the doubt, but I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's start with the last point there. The soft skills in particular, absolutely. And what are soft skills? I think I understand what soft skills are. How do you relate with other human beings? Are you able to actually, do you have a posture or an affect that's actually agreeable? Okay. So what are those soft? Can you hone those and make yourself more presentable? Yes. Stronger work ethic? Yes. So that last point, total agreement on that. I think that should be the baseline expectation. So when it comes, though, to, and this is just purely anecdotal, and what we just heard was a much more comprehensive perspective about this fight than what most of us would probably have. I know somebody very well who is almost done with medical school. Brilliant individual. His wife went to OT school as well. She's equally as brilliant. From my understanding is they really didn't have their pick of the litter as far as which school they went to medical school for, because of, well, he's a white dude. That was my understanding. But nonetheless, he was accepted at a state university where he's a resident in, and he's going to find a good job here very soon. So that's kind of a problem here. For the sliver of the sliver of the sliver of the sliver who are willing and capable to take on the debt, to take on just the rigorous training that is required to go into the field of medicine, especially as a doctor or a specialized surgeon. You know, we should make those barriers to entry as low as possible. And I'm talking about for U.S. citizens. So there's that. That's very anecdotal. For the rest of the point, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, $300,000 is too much to raise the floor to the H-1B, you know, I'll listen. But I think that's a good compromise. But going back to Elon Musk, he has a perspective that I think a lot of people don't have. Obviously, being who he is. He is pioneering multiple industries that require very specialized training. Is he hiring people who have a high school diploma to be an engineer at Tesla, at SpaceX, at X? No, probably not. So does somebody like Elon Musk have a perspective about what our American universities are producing at the human level better than any of us would? Yes. I think that's unquestionably yes. Does that mean though, that automatically, because you're an American and you're out of luck, you don't have the job that you would like, does that mean that you deserve to be replaced? No. People have the tendency to jump into one of two ditches on this issue. I've seen this all week. So my question is to the letter writer, and maybe that was addressed there and I missed it. And my question is to Elon Musk. What are you doing to fix the root causes of why our country is spitting out so many highly unqualified individuals? Your description, or just people who are not ready and willing to take on the challenges and rigors of these specialized industries. What are the root causes of that? And I think Vivek tried to get into that, saying that there is a cultural problem. But his solution was not right as well. Yeah, there's a cultural problem. We've got too many unmotivated, unskilled individuals, untrained individuals, and it's a cultural issue. Maybe too much laziness, not enough pressure in the home to actually produce individual. If you're actually having kids, producing kids that are and able to be successful. Okay, but your solution was, well, that's why we need to replace them. That's not right. So my question is, what are we doing? Are we really willing to have the conversation that we need to have on this issue? Mm-hmm. The ditches that I've seen people fall into the most on this issue is merely because you were born here, you are entitled to have a good paying job, regardless of what you bring to the table. No, that's not a meritocracy. Not a meritocracy. We had this conversation off the air the other day. That's not a meritocracy. On the other extreme, though, well, you suck, you're unmotivated, and that's why you need to be replaced. No. What are we doing? Are we really willing to have the root root cause conversation, if I can speak English for 5 seconds, the root cause conversation about what's going on here? Because I don't think you can be intellectually consistent with any of the other cultural issues in this country and not say that is trickled down into the labor market. So, yes, I think you can say there are some very basic problems with young people in this country. But there are some very basic problems with people who are motivated, young people who are motivated to have a better life, to have the American dream, that are unfair, that previous generations did not have to contend with. And I just see too many people falling into these ditches that I just laid out.
I think normally I would argue in most situations that we have to discuss the premise. We have to settle on the premise of an argument before we can have it. Okay. This is one of those cases I think I would do the opposite. I think we need to test the conclusions of the arguments before we discuss the premise.
Because I think in this thing, the conclusion actually unveils the real premise.
Correct. I just think we need to know bottom line. We have to agree as a country that it is not strategically prudent to have the highest level of technological savvy and availability and capacity and capability amongst people that are not natively loyal to a country. That's just, we have to agree to that on some level, right? Otherwise, why even have a nation? Okay. So then I think what needs to be answered first and foremost is there a sufficient supply of those people to fill that need? And if there's not, or there's not to a point, well, then I think it forces us to explore one premise. If there is, or there is to a point, then I think it forces us to explore the other. In this argument, each side wants their premise affirmed. Okay? And that's, first of all, that's smart argumentation. But number two, we need to actually know, does the premise match with the problem? Okay? I mean, I had a premise long before we wrote Fauci and Bargain that this entire damn thing was a scam. We were talking about this thing called COVID and scamdemics. Go back and look what I was posting on Facebook in the weeks leading up to lockdown, just looking at the data out of Italy and doing the math. It doesn't. I was posting in February that what we're seeing on TV about what's happening in Italy does not match up with what the actual data is on Italy's own dashboards of this COVID virus. There's a lot of things that I could have secure in my premise. There's a lot of things, Aaron, that I could have gotten ahead of the data on and said on this show months before I ultimately said them. But I didn't do that because I needed the data to tell the truth rather than want to affirm my own narrative. I was pretty confident the data would affirm the narrative, but I didn't know that for sure, right? I don't know that for sure. Okay. So in this case, I think we need to just have and this is something the Trump administration should be willing to provide on this debate. Because debates like this really go to the heart of why there's even going to be a Trump administration, and was a first one, is his willingness to speak to these kinds of issues, right? Mm-hmm. And this goes to the heart of J.D. Vance's entire political identity and stuff like this, right? Okay? So let's just start with a very simple question. Before we start having a meta conversation about our American kids ill-equipped, lazy, blah, 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 okay? Before we have a meta conversation, is this an actual need? And we need to see some real data on this.
Yeah.
And if it is, then we need to have a meta conversation. And if it's not, then you have a different conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that has to be answered first.
How do you explain, 7-Eleven bringing in managers on H-1B visas? I mean,
you can't.
You can't.
No, you can't. Well, you could, but all the explanations are bad. Yeah. All the explanations are bad. It is quite possible. Dan Wilkinson, thank you for your note, brother. We appreciate your perspective, your specifics, your experience, and we appreciated it so much. I wanted to make sure we shared it with our own audience. Okay, it is very likely that Dan is operating in an ecosystem completely, wholly different within the same program than as the program was intended, than how it is being utilized in other venues and areas. That's entirely possible.
Do you think? I mean, this is a big question here, but do you think? Just anecdotally, I've seen this, and I've seen some data that bears this out as well, that the younger you go, the percentage that are actually want to go to college for a degree of any type is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking.
My own kids are emblematic of
this. Yes. Do you think this is a self-correcting thing eventually?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
they're obviously, like Dan was the letter writer.
Yep.
Obviously, you want something. For going into the field of medicine, that is a legitimate degree that you need to have, that we need you to have, and that we want you to have.
Yep.
But underwater basket weaving, on any of these other
why do I need a degree in English? Why do I need a degree in history? Unless I'm going into an academic pursuit, that's really the only places where, or my undergrad is in history and then I'm doing postgrad in criminal justice because I'm going to go to Quantico or something.
Yes.
Okay. But by and large, could my undergrad degree get me a job the day after graduation? That's the question I should be asking myself. Or do I need that degree to put me in the grad program that will eventually get me said job? Right?
Yep.
Great stuff, guys. Appreciate all of you. Thanks for tuning in this week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday. Until then, Romans 8:28.